Welcome back, everyone. Now, something that's deeply ingrained, I believe, into British culture and indeed the psyche of British people is that good old-fashioned sense of fair play. You know, what's good for one is good for another. We've never liked to see people being treated unfairly, right? And I don't think there's a nation on earth that backs the underdog or wants to see a level playing field more than us British. If you give us the chance to cheat, we don't appreciate it because that's not cricket, right? It's not the British way. And for me, this is something that Keir Starmer clearly doesn't get or understand. But it wouldn't be cricket just to pick on him, would it? Because let's have it right. The will and the democratic vote of the people has been ignored now by 3 consecutive Tory governments and a Brexit vote. What was the point in even bothering? Many Brits will say that cricket hasn't been on offer for us for a very long time. But in my opinion, Keir Starmer's place in the history books as the most disliked Prime Minister of all time has already been secured in just a matter of a few short weeks after being elected by a huge minority of the British people. The rapid and frightening descent of free speech, the removal of our rights to complain, to debate, to disagree, and to protest, and the covert introduction of blasphemy laws will never be forgiven by the British people, and I'll tell you why. Because deep down inside most of us is that sense of fair play. It's kind of etched into our souls, isn't it? And many of us will have forefathers that gave their lives and limbs to protect our rights to freedom and the right to have our say without being thrown in jail North Korea style. And Labour may have got away with taxing us to death, charging us by the mile just to get to work or to take the kids to school. He could get away with stealing our senior citizens' heating allowance. He might even get away with coming round and kipping in their own beds. But the British people won't take kindly to being told to shut up and stay quiet. Mr. Starmer has made his bed. He's set out his stall and he's put down a very scary marker. And I believe that people follow leaders and respect fair play, common sense, and dare I say, a sense of loyalty. And over the last couple of weeks, many people feel, rightly or wrongly, that we've seen anything but from Labour after their super heavy-handed sentences and handling for one community, and the perception at least of a blind eye and a totally different hand being dealt for others. That, of course, is not to excuse or condone in any way the absolutely appalling behaviour by some who have unquestionably deserved their custodial sentences. But there are some others that are now in jail whose lives and the lives of their families have been ruined for offences that at any other time would have received a mere caution, if that. Can anyone honestly say that our streets are safer today because a man who sung a stupid song is now behind bars? I don't think so. And let's be clear, this is not the fault of any other community, and they should not be blamed for it. Because many of them will feel that Labour have done nothing at all, nothing whatsoever, to help or to heal community relations, rather sowing further seed of doubt and suspicion, which is very sad and very unfortunate. The following report from the Telegraph should annoy every right-minded citizen, no matter what community they come from, and I quote, "Labour has been accused of putting the interests of violent criminals above those of hard-working British families after dropping Tory plans to ban terrorists from social housing. Dame Priti Patel, one of the 6 candidates to replace Rishi Sunak as Tory leader, claimed the disgraceful decision showed the government could not be trusted on law and order. Earlier this year, the Conservatives, when still in government, announced plans to block terrorists with unspent convictions from claiming social housing unless absolutely necessary to uphold national security. But Labour revealed it had scrapped the proposals just weeks after the election, with Minister Matthew Pennycook confirming that the government had no plans to deliver the reforms." End of quote. And this was after scrapping the senior citizens' heating allowances. These aren't community issues. These sort of crazy decisions affect all of us, and we should all be united in condemning them. And watching an old clip of the Prime Minister, you have to ask yourself, just what has happened to this man? What's gone wrong? Where did this Soviet-style leadership come from? Or was it always there, just hidden away until now? Let's watch this.
Must the bar be? Because we've heard of people obviously going to jail for saying unpleasant things about missing children. Other people have been fined and given community service for saying unpleasant things about dead British soldiers. In your view in future, is that the sort of thing that it should be criminally investigated?
I think the threshold for prosecution has to be high.
Higher than I've just described?
Well, we live in a democracy, and if free speech is to be protected, there has to be a high threshold. People have the right to be offensive, they have the right to be insulting.
Sounds like you'd like to see far fewer prosecutions.
I think if there are a lot of prosecutions, it'll have a chilling effect on free speech, and I think that's a very important consideration.
I mean, wow, is that really the same guy who appears to have lowered that prosecution threshold to mere hurty words on Facebook? And if he thinks that this is going to end well for him in the long run politically, then he's read the room very, very badly indeed. And I'm absolutely sure that we're all in favour of lowering crime and coming down hard on criminals. What's not to like? Real criminals, that is. But personally, I'm a little bit baffled as to how we can suddenly deal with some offenders so quickly and so efficiently, whilst failing to deal with things like knife crime and offences against women, up 50% on trains alone. And concerned voices from influencers, politicians and leaders from across the globe are growing. And the world, thankfully and clearly, has its eye on the United Kingdom and its right to the most basic human right, freedom and freedom of speech. And whether Keir Starmer wants to recognise it or not, the British people are feeling oppressed. They are feeling depressed. And they do feel that they are being treated unfairly and they're not being listened to. And look, at the end of the day, it's up to him. He can shoot as many messengers as he wants, but the sentiment and the message is going to remain the same. I don't think that the British public will ever be able to forgive this Prime Minister for the way in which he's perceived, at least, to have dealt with the British public over the last couple of weeks. And the so-called silent majority now feels like the silenced majority. I guess we'll find out the next time we get the chance to vote.